back. I hope most of you missed me a little bit. I miss talking to you every day. It's Jason. Dan is here. You heard.
I was hoping you'd come back.
Well, thank you, Dan. I miss having our conversations. I was doing the radio show in the coach bus as we were traveling along Mykonos, throughout that island, throughout Santorini, and in Athens, a WCCO radio trip. And I have a lot to talk about. And, I don't want to turn this show into an equivalent of the DeRusha vacation slideshow.
But here it comes in 3, 2, and 1.
I mean, enough of you said like, oh, I can't wait to hear the recap of your trip. I do think the world has changed a little bit, and Facebook changed it when it comes to sharing your vacation, right? I'm old enough to remember when my dad would get out the slideshow projector, Can't you guys hear that sound right now in your head? Dan, you got to find an example of that sound. I need to hear the slideshow, the kind of like the little platter advancing one after the next. Maybe that's how, if I have really been fully planning this, I'm a little jet lagged, everybody. I'm doing my best. I think people want to hear about everybody else's vacation. There was, and maybe I'm wrong, 651-461-9226. Should we do this sort of green light or gong style? Like, do you want to hear about it or not? No, we're not going to do it that way because I'm going to tell you anyway. It's my show. I think Facebook has changed it where we used to have this idea. There it is, yeah. So back in the early days of Facebook, when you would share a little bit about your vacation, people would get annoyed and say, this is you bragging about what you can afford and the time you can take. And I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. And yet we would force you to sit through picture after picture after picture. But then Facebook came around and people want to see it. People want to see it. I don't know when this flipped, when it went from being like the humble brag, right? Like you'd show the beach vacation and sort of rub it into everybody. Too bad you weren't here. And not really meaning it, I think generally today, like I like to see where people are going. It gives me ideas for the future. You sort of save people's posts like, oh, or you add a destination to your own bucket list. I don't see it as bragging. I like seeing what other people's favorite destination is, whether it's a beach or a city or whatever it is, and you see it and you're like, oh, I would like to go there. Or sometimes you see it and think, not for me. Not for me. Now, this trip was a Colette trip, and next year we're going to Ireland. So, if Ireland's on your bucket list, it would be fun to have you guys go with me. But it is really cool to go on vacation with people who listen to this show. Because usually there's a dynamic. So one person in the couple is a listener, and the other is like, well, sure, Greece sounds fun. So like Dan and Deanna, we're on the trip with Dan and Deanna, which Dan, by the way, and not Dan Cook, but, also you get a sense that he's been touched by the Spirit as well.
Oh,
because Dan looks like he's 50. Well, he maybe looks like he's 40. This guy is jacked. And so
yeah, that's definitely not me.
But I get inspiration, especially being on these trips with people who are retired, or a couple of the people were business owners. Like Mary and Vic were talking all about like how they've donated all this land, different land for preservation. They've got like a huge garden going near their home right now where they donate all the fresh produce to the food shelf. You're like, this is amazing. And then Dan and Deanna. So Dan wanted to know if I really eat as much Minnesota pork as I say. He's like, "Are you really eating pork chops all the time?" And sure enough, last night, back in town, we went to Vinay for dinner. And that's the best pork chop in town. Beautiful. Oh, yeah. So then we're doing like improv Minnesota pork commercials at the karaoke bar in Santorini. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. But I was inspired on this trip that you have also a number of solo travelers, which I think this is interesting. And this is something that I've told Alyssa, that if I get hit by a truck, within a year, I want you to go on a trip. And go on a trip by yourself, because there were you had Stevie there, and he was a solo traveler. And you had Jim, who is another solo traveler. And Barb was there, and Rita. And so you just had a number of these kind of solo travelers. It's cool. I think that's really cool. Like later in life, you go on a group trip and you make friends. And we had dinner with Pamela and Steve, and it just was a great experience all the way around. It really was. And Greece. So I posted a video on Instagram of a tour of the Acropolis. And so one of the striking things about Athens, it is a reminder of how young of a country we are. We're babies. The United States of America, we think we are the best. We're the best country in the world. And I do think in many respects, the United States is the best country in the world. But we're young, man. We are babies. And you get the sense, and Athens is a fascinating city. One, so I sometimes think like my Twitter trolls, if I were a talk show host in Athens, would be constantly talking about the graffiti. I don't know if there's a surface in Athens that isn't covered with graffiti, other than the ruins. It's amazing. I've never seen so much graffiti in my life. So we're on this trip, and there's a sign in the hotel that says there's a day of protest. There's a shutdown of the metro line, the subway line. And their subway is nice. It's like 25 years old, I think. Pretty young subway. But if you think it's taken a long time to build a light rail line here, in Athens, when you start digging, you find ancient ruins. There are ancient ruins everywhere. Now, imagine if we lived in an area that, like, the structures from the 1880s were buried in volcanic ash or bombed out in one war or another. And so every time you wanted to dig, clunk, oh, another ruin. Out come the archaeologists. It's just so strange to think about. And you'd be walking around Athens and you'd see a skyscraper, and next to it would be like kind of skylight covered ruins, where I'm sure like some governmental nerd is like, nope. And I don't know how they decide like this is a significant ruin, this is not a significant ruin. I mean, they all, at a certain point, I look at it and it's like, we get the picture. Right? I mean, we know like people were living here 2,000 years ago. And we did tour a ruin site that was amazing. There was a whole city that was covered in volcanic ash, and the ash and the rock preserved the city. So once they discovered it and they start kind of using a paintbrush and washing, wiping away the ash, and the ash just comes off the structure. They revealed some of these buildings had 3 stories still in intact condition. Just, you're looking at this stuff, and for me, it's like, even some of the people in our group were like, I'm not really that into history, but this is amazing. And it is amazing. You think like, here is it preserved in the ash of a volcano that had it covered up. But you're at the Acropolis, and you're thinking here you had some of the great thinkers of all time talking about democracy and talking about how you set up a government and what is the meaning of democracy. And it's hard not to look at a country where there's so much effort designed around preserving relics of the past. And then you come home and there's a freaking front end loader that's knocking down part of the White House. And it's such a contrast. It's such a contrast. I'm not saying I want our country to run like Greece is running. That's not what I'm saying. But it is a fascinating glimpse at this moment in time and kind of what we're doing as a country. Take the trip. Take the trip. When you get a chance to take a trip, and it doesn't have to be around the world, but I tell you, it is illuminating to go somewhere far and to see signs that you don't understand. The Greek alphabet, man. How do you pronounce a triangle? I mean, it's a weird alphabet.
Delta.
Is that you're like there's the sigma, which is sometimes an S sound, and
Yes.
but you're looking at these signs, and I'm like, most of them are written in Greek and English.
Yeah.
But it is a confusing scenario because we went to a restaurant, and then other people on the trip were asking Alyssa and me, like, where'd you go for dinner? I'm like, I'm gonna have to look that up because I do not know.
And it doesn't map onto the English alphabet. So
No!
it's very confusing.
It's pretty interesting stuff. 3:20. Thank you for indulging me on my trip down memory lane. Lots of posts and lots of pictures on my Facebook. Just search Jason DeRusha. Same on my Instagram. I have more pictures. And if you want to read more, it'll be in my newsletter. So if you go to jasonderusha.com, you can sign up for my free email newsletter, and we put links to the show and all sorts of good stuff.
And when does that come out?
Tomorrow morning. I even sent a newsletter from Athens.
Wow, that is commitment.
That's stupid. I don't know why I did that, but you feel committed. You're like, I may as well.